I'm Rebecca Anand, and the book that I will be talking about today is Jane Austen's Emma. I would give this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The storyline of this book is kind of a typical Jane Austen story in that it's a romance novel. However, this one's a little bit different because the protagonist, Emma, does not want to get married, and she is an heiress, so she really doesn't have to in this time period to secure her wealth and her future, which is really interesting in a situation where that was a culture that marriage is expected. However, she does like setting up all of her friends and trying to pair them all off and get them all successfully married. She takes credit for both her sisters and her governess's marriages, and she meets a friend, Harriet Smith, along the way, and she tries to set up Harriet with multiple different men. Throughout the story, she's quite the sassy character, which is another thing that I really like about this book. The writing style is kind of archaic for what we would usually deal with today, and it is a bit of a challenge. If you like to challenge yourself, the longer you read it and the farther into the book you get, the easier it is to understand the language and the easier it comes to you. But at the beginning it is definitely a bit of a challenge. But once you get into it, you realize that despite being kind of archaic, it is very sassy, which is kind of fun. There's a lot of just subtle sarcasm in there that makes the book, you kind of have to chuckle sometimes. The characters are also really well defined, and they're all defined through Emma's point of view a little bit, with her kind of snarky view on life. So there's her hypochondriac father that we get kind of exasperated with. There's Mr. Knightley, who is her partner in crime, kind of. There's Mr. Elton, who starts out very nice and ends up very stuck up. And it's interesting just to see the characters develop and how they're all very distinct through Emma's personality. That's another thing I really like about the book, is that everything goes through Emma's filter. It's written in third person, but it's very, very much from Emma's point of view. And it comes with its own sense of an unreliable narrator. Now, this is something that Jane Austen does in a lot of her books that I really love, is because Emma is completely oblivious to everything that's happening around her, but she thinks she knows exactly what's going on. So it's really fun as a reader to be able to pick out stuff before Emma can and see what's happening through Emma's point of view, but she sees it completely differently than perhaps what's actually happening. An example of that would be her brother-in-law, her sister's husband, is talking to her about Mr. Elton, who she is currently trying to nudge toward Harriet Smith, her friend. And she thinks she's doing a pretty good job of this. Now, all the time when she's around Mr. Elton, and Harriet's also there. Or I guess whenever Harriet's around Mr. Elton, Emma's there. It's probably a better way to explain that. And so here she's in the carriage with her brother-in-law, and he brings up an interesting point to her. "Yes," said Mr. John Knightley presently, with some slyness, "he seems to have a great deal of goodwill towards you." "Me?" she replied with a smile of astonishment. "Are you imagining me to be Mr. Elton's object?" "Such an imagination has crossed me, I own, Emma, and if it never occurred to you before, you may as well take it into consideration now." Mr. Elton in love with me? What an idea! I do not say it is so, but you will do well to consider whether it is so or not, and to regulate your behaviour accordingly. I think your manners to him encouraging. I speak as a friend, Emma. You had better look about you and ascertain what you do, and what you mean to do. "I thank you, but I assure you that you are quite mistaken. Mr. Elton and I are very good friends, and nothing more." And she walked on, amusing herself in the consideration of the blunders which often arise from a partial knowledge of circumstances, of the mistakes which people of high pretensions to judgment are ever falling into, and not well pleased with her brother for imagining her blind and ignorant, and in want of counsel. He said no more. So part of what I love about that, you get to see a little bit of Emma's character come through there with her thoughts of, oh no, that's silly. You shouldn't think that. And at the same time, she's talking about people who think they know everything, but they really don't understand what's going on. It turns out, spoiler alert, that Mr. Elton may be falling more for Emma than for Harriet. And so her brother-in-law was correct, and she's the one who is in the dark about it, which I think is a really, really fun circumstance. This is definitely a book I would recommend, especially if you're looking for a little bit of a challenge, but it's lighthearted. Sometimes the plot does move just a little bit slowly. That's kind of the style of Jane Austen's books, but for the most part, this kept me interested, it kept me on my toes, and it was just really fun to read. Thank you.